Welcome back to Everyday Lessons in the Bible. Today I was in Ezekiel Chapters 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. And all of these are judgment against the foreign nations, the ones that came against Israel, that caused them issues, some of which caused them to stray. But, it's still the people of Israel's choice to stray. But it's like all the nations that worship other gods and they have idols and things like that. The children of Israel drifted more towards that than staying focused on the Lord. But they did other things, and so God is saying that he is going to punish those who came against the people of Israel, especially during their time of discipline. So if you think about it, sometimes when we are going through a trial because maybe God is disciplining us for whatever reason, and then there are people that rejoice in that, rejoice seeing you suffer, or rejoice seeing things not working out for you, or being, treating you badly while you're in that discipline, right? So that can be super difficult for people when you're going through these things. And so that's what's happening here, is God is saying that he's going to punish those who have come against them. So he's talking about the Ammonites and the Moabites. And then he goes on to Edom and the Philistines. And so we have to know, because God says it here, that those who are revengeful towards you, God's vengeance will be upon them. So in other words, God will take care of those that have come against you. And which is, so in other words, you don't have to come against people that have come against you. When people come against you, hurt you, or whatever, you can just turn them over to God and let God deal with them. And so then he comes against Tyre, and he's talking to, about how Tyre was like, the gate of the people is broken. And so they just come in and plunder the land and take away all that they had. And so when people are exposed or helpless, that is when other people will come in for their gain. But we also have to trust that God will come against them. I think about, like when you have a storm and stores are shut down and then people come in and loot the stores, that's kind of a similar example. And sometimes you can't get restitution for that from the people, or it get resolved. And so therefore, you have to trust the Lord that he's going to bring forth that. It's all God's anyway. And if you can look at that from that lens, that everything is God's. So if somebody takes something from you, it was God's anyway, and God can restore that to you. And it says he will bring evil to a dreadful end, which I think is glorious, and that God will set beauty in the land of the living. So that's a beautiful end to that little section there, when people come against you. And because he's talking here about how he will send the evil down to the pit, and that he will bring beauty to the land of the living. And so we carry on, and it splits up, which is kind of interesting. It talks about the prince of Tyre, but then in one chapter, but then in another chapter, it calls the king of Tyre. And when I was reading some of the footnotes, the king of Tyre, he's really talking more to Satan, because that's something that I noticed is when you read this section, it sounds just like Satan to me. It sounds like, how he was perfect and beautiful and everything when he was in heaven, and then cast down to earth, and the destruction that has come because of him, and then the destruction that God's going to bring forth on him, with fire. And so it's just really interesting and fascinating when you read these scriptures, because the prince of Tyre, it's like pride. It's the pride that fills your life. Everything you have, your wealth, your wisdom, your status, you have made yourself your own God, and you have given no glory to God, and that God will humble you and he will take it all away. And so I think about that, how we as a people, we will do that. We will exalt what we have, that God has graciously given us, we will exalt it and glorify it instead of God. And we will put all of our faith and hope in those riches, in those things, when those are things that God had blessed you with, not for you to glorify it, but to glorify him for having given that to you. And so then that's when it comes into Satan and how he was beautiful and he let pride get in the way. And so this whole little section here, which is in chapter 28, this last little section, I really think this is a depiction of Satan, and it's the beginning and the end of Satan. And God says this throughout all of this, that he does all of these things so that they will know that I am the Lord, right? He says it throughout. He is the Lord. And that is the goal. The goal is to point people to the Lord instead of themselves. And God, he loves his people no matter what. And that includes you and I. He loves us all no matter if we stray. He will execute judgment on those who come against us, right? And he did that against those who came against Israel. And we can trust that. We can know that if we glorify God, vengeance is the Lord. You know, that's all it is. Vengeance is the Lord. And we can trust that. And so then you get into, in the last chapter that we're going to talk about today, is Egypt. And so if you'll remember, a lot of the children of Israel, when they were taken into captivity, some of them fled to Egypt, and they were hanging out in Egypt. In Egypt, you know, they didn't worship God either. And so God eventually had King Nebuchadnezzar go and invade Egypt, really because they had taken in the Israelites, and the Israelites were supposed to all be taken into captivity. And so God was using the king of Babylon to go into Egypt for those people. And God will always expose the wickedness in the world. We can always count on that. And so when you feel persecuted by God, and then you also feel like you're persecuted by others, we turn that over to God and we let God deal with that. Because God's goal, like here in Egypt, is for them to know that he is God. And he says it repeatedly, that it's like you can run, but you cannot hide from God. And so God came into Egypt and he scattered them and made it desolate for like 40 years because of what they had done. You know, they had taken in the children of Israel. And so God had Nebuchadnezzar come in and get them and bring them back, you know. And God gives Nebuchadnezzar Egypt as payment for his labor for God. So God had him doing his bidding for him, I guess you could say. And then he needed payment for that. So he allowed him to take Egypt as payment for all of that. And then in the very last verse, it mentions, I will cause a horn to spring up for the house of Israel, and I will open your lips among them, and they will know that I am the Lord. And if you look in Revelation, you'll hear about the horn. There's several different references to different types of horn in Revelation. So that's always cool when you can see something in the Old Testament referring to stuff in the New Testament, just like Jesus. It's always pointing to Jesus in the Old Testament. And I always think that's so fascinating, how it all comes together. If you could just read it, and you won't notice it the first time around or the second time around, maybe the third time around. I don't know. I don't know how many times it'll take you to read through the whole Bible, but gosh, when you read through it and then you come back again, you start to see how God intertwines all the things from the Old Testament and the New Testament and just brings it all together. But I think the biggest thing is glorify God in everything that you do. And when people do you wrong, or if you're being disciplined at the time and people do you wrong while you're in the discipline, or gloat about it, rejoice in your suffering, whatever that is, just know that God has your back. Even in the discipline, he has your back, and he will bring vengeance upon those who have come against you. And he is a God of restoration, and he will restore the things that you have lost, the years that you have lost. He is such a good, good God, and he is gracious and merciful. So I just hope that encourages you today, that no matter what season you are walking through, God is with you in that season. Thank you for listening to Everyday Lessons in the Bible. I hope you have a blessed day. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel.